Good evening, everybody. In this video, I want to talk to you about Eddy. Does that mean I have to try and speak Portuguese now? Boa tarde, como vai, tudo bem? That's going to have to be it. I'm afraid it's about the extent of what I know. But I want to talk about something that I hopefully know a little bit more about, which is Eddy and why people really hate playing against him. It's a funny subject. I'll actually speak to people who don't even play video games, and I'll say Tekken, and they go, "Oh yeah, Tekken 3, fuck Eddy." It's like people still manage to have blisters around the bunghole about a game that came out 2 decades ago, so that's hilarious. But when you speak to people who do play Tekken and who do dislike Eddy, if you ask them to elaborate, usually you don't get a very clear answer. They'll usually say something like, "Well, he's spamming and he's all over the screen and I don't get to hit him," but then their, mom gives them some apple juice and they calm down. But what I talk about in this video is like reasons why he might actually be a very frustrating character to play against, and I think that's something that we can extrapolate some information about the game from. And as you've probably guessed, it's not going to boil down to him being a spammer. That's a funny image, by the way. Eddy sending you emails about meeting Russian women and getting a bigger penis. I live in Japan, by the way, so I always get the one where it's like Russian women want to sleep with Japanese men, and it's like, why the fuck are you emailing me then? But yeah, let's get into the actual discussion about the characters. So I think I want to start off by saying that something that you may not know if you're new to the game is that Tekken is a game that is full of these hidden, unspoken rules. They're not written down anywhere, and nobody's going to explain them to you. You have to sort of build up your knowledge of them through gut feeling by playing the game over a long period of time. And Eddy is one of those characters who is very strong because he's very good at just deviating from the norm, and so you can't really play against him the way you would against a very generic character. And when something is allowed to be exceptionally strong or exceptionally weak in this game, it's usually because it deviates from these norms in some way. One way, for example, Eddy's very interesting is that, he obviously has like the best backdash ever. It's like the longest backdash in the game, but then he can't really move sideways. And another example that I think is interesting when it comes to Eddy, if we're gonna record my opponent going into relaxed here for a little bit, I think that'll do. There are a lot of stances in this game that are built around applying a mix-up while crushing highs. So that can be, any kind of any version of a crouch dash, Harrier from Katarina, anything like that. There's a lot of stuff like that in the game, and so an instinct that you probably have when you're fighting against that a lot of the time is that you'll try and scoop your opponent or interrupt them with some sort of scoopy mid, like a down forward one. But if I try and do that against Eddy here when he goes into relax, you can see that this actually completely whiffs. And so relax is not like your typical kind of mix-up stance. It's very unique in a lot of ways. And so what that demands of you is you need to know exactly how you want to deal with relaxed with your character. You can't just use some sort of canned version of defense here that you would use against a super generic character. I think the most generic character in the game is probably Shaheen, in my opinion. And so when you're playing against Shaheen, what do you need to actually know about him? You need to know that when he's crouching, he can slide, and then maybe mix that up with a mid launcher like a while standing 2 or an orbital. And then you need to be aware that if he tries to counter hit you with 4-1, you can duck the second hit. If you keep those two things in mind, then everything else is super generic, and so playing against Shaheen doesn't demand of you that you know anti-Shaheen strategy. With Eddy, that's not really the case. You need to kind of specifically play anti-Eddy, and that involves going into practice mode and actually making him go into relaxed and testing stuff out. Oh, back 2 actually works. So that is work that I think a lot of people are not prepared to do, and if you're not prepared to do that work, then I'm sorry, but you better be prepared to lose against Eddy. It's just one of the harsh realities of playing this game. So yeah, I can actually just, before we go into what I want to make the main topic of this video, I can just mention that relaxed. I know a lot of people hate this stance. It's one of the main frustrations they have with the character. It's obviously a very powerful mix-up stance because he has a low launcher and a mid launcher from this stance. And so when he mixes you up, if you guess wrong, you are going to get launched. this stance is balanced around the fact that you can actually punish Eddy very heavily if you guess right in the mix-up situation as well. And so why is it so frustrating for people? Well, my guess would actually be that they're trying to do stuff like a down forward 1 here, and they just whiff. They don't know how to deal with relaxed, and so they just whiff something or they flinch. And if you whiff against Eddy when he's in this stance, if we're going to be completely honest, it doesn't matter if you guessed wrong in the mix-up situation. If you if you guessed wrong, because if you whiff and he does the low or the mid, you're going to get launched either way, and then you get pissed and he steamrolls you for the rest of the round, right? But now I want to transition into the main reason I actually think Eddy is so exceptionally strong. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I've never heard anybody else highlight it, so I think it's important to highlight in this video. And it has to do with the fact that I think Eddy actually has effectively the largest health bar of any character in the game. Now that might sound a little bit weird, so what do I mean? Because in Tekken, obviously, all characters have the same amount of health. They don't have different amounts of health depending on who you play. But in Eddy's case, it actually works out a lot of the time as though he was wearing body armor, which is weird. And it has to do with damage scaling. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to record my opponent here doing a jump. So I think that'll do. Let's see if we can make him jump. Okay, so I'm just going to explain this in kind of basic terms if we have people watching who are very new to the concept of damage scaling. But if I just one jab my opponent like this, you can see that on the left this says 7 damage 100%. And so what that means is that Eddy's one jab does 7 damage, and right now it's doing 100% of that 7 damage. But if I allow my opponent to jump, and I then hit him, you can see that it says 4 damage, 70%. This is because this is airborne scaling. And so when you hit somebody when they're considered airborne in this game, you actually do only 70% of normal damage. It is also important to note that while the damage scaling starts at 70%, it then continues to downscale the same way a normal combo would. So if I do something like this... Okay, he jumped over. Just a normal little float combo, you can see that already at the 4th hit we're all the way down to 30% damage scaling, which is the lowest amount of damage you can do. The lowest amount your damage will scale to in a combo in this game. So that's why that's a way they've balanced, airborne damage in this game, and it's important to understand, especially when it comes to Eddy, and I'm going to explain why in a little bit. But let's think of a good example. So for example, this transition here would probably be a good example. I do that, move into relax, that'll probably work. So the thing about Eddy is that when he's doing a lot of his very unique stuff, like he's standing on his hands like this, or he's doing many of his weird transitions, he's actually not considered a standing opponent. Most of the time he's actually considered to be airborne. And this is very, very important, because as I've shown you, when an opponent is considered to be airborne, the amount of damage they take is heavily downscaled. It becomes important for some other reasons that we're going to talk about later. But say, for example, that an opponent whiffs something against you in a normal situation, and you'll try and whiff punish them with a launcher like this, and then you go into some sort of combo, and then you get good damage, right? And if you carry through the wall like that, you get great damage. But if Eddy whiffs something like the little transition that I recorded earlier, and I just try and hit him with a low right there, you can see that that actually did 70% damage. Even though it was a whiff punish, it only did 70% damage. It did airborne scaled damage, because Eddy was standing on his hands or doing some sort of weird flying through the air thing. And so, like I say, he takes reduced damage, even though it should have been like a normal whiff punish in a typical situation. This also applies to his most powerful mix-up stance, which is relax. So if we allow Eddy to do that transition again, we wait for the attack animation to end, so it's no longer a whiff punish, and we then just hit him when he's in relaxed. Like that, you can see that that actually does 80% damage. When Eddy is in relaxed, he's more like in a grounded state, and so your damage scaling will be to 80%. So when Eddy is in one of his stances or in one of his transitions, he takes nerfed damage, and I think that's actually one of the reasons he's so extremely frustrating, because Eddy himself actually does really good damage. A lot of his stuff is very, very high damage. You know, you get 25 off of this, you get like 37 off of this, you have good combos. Another reason your combo damage is so good is because he has this thing, right? And it's kind of like Excavator from Gigas, and how the damage scaling gets reset on the final hit. It's a little bit advanced, don't worry if you don't like get the whole picture, but basically he gets upscale damage on the final hit of his combo, boosting the damage of the combo in the same way, you know, King gets good combo damage when he ends a combo with a throw. And so the ways in which Eddy manipulates damage scaling in this game as a character means that you are constantly going to do reduced damage against him, while he is constantly going to do full and very potent damage against you. And so if you're just trading hits normally back and forth, typically he's going to outrun you damage-wise. And so what you need to do to play against this character is you need to know exactly how you want to deal with relax. You need to know exactly how you want to deal with a handstand, and you need to have these specific choices that you rely on that are specific to your character. And that's very important. Say, for example, that my opponent does a forward 3 and goes into handstand like this. Let's record that. Okay, so that'll probably do. If my opponent does this, and I try and like hit him with a jab or something. Okay, say for example that I try and whiff punish him actually with this move, which is a good whiff punisher for Eddy, down forward 3+4. You can see that when that would normally have done like at least 65 to 70 damage if I whiff punish like that, but right now it did like 11 and I didn't even get Oki. Like it's terrible, right? But if I'm a little bit more experienced and I see this, maybe I know that I can do a back to 4 here and I can spin him, and then if I'm able to convert that, I can maybe carry to the wall, I can set something up, and I can turn this into my advantage. And so it's important to know how to maximize against Eddy, otherwise you're not going to be able to keep up with his damage in the long run, and this effectively large health bar that he has. And that's my thesis on why Eddy is actually hard to play against. So you need specific strategies, and I think a lot of people are too lazy to develop that. And then I think he also effectively takes a lot of reduced damage. The other thing I want to mention here that I think is very important is that when you get flow combos and you hit him out of stances and stuff like this, you have to get good at one of the most advanced concepts in Tekken, which is conversion combos. You hear a lot of people when you listen to like Tekken commentary talk about like, oh, that was a nice conversion, or he converted to the wall, or stuff like that. What that means, if you're unfamiliar, when we say a conversion combo, say I were to launch my opponent with Eddy, maybe I do something like, I don't really remember my Eddy combos, but what would be a good example? Okay, say I do this. That is like a normal bread and butter Eddy combo, and I do something very similar to that every single time I get a launch with this character. And you have your typical bread and butter combo that you have for your character. You probably picked it up on YouTube or something. But in a lot of situations in this game, maybe all of a sudden the wall is near you at an awkward angle. Maybe you actually launched your opponent from the side or something. Maybe you floated them out of a stance or out of the air. Maybe you actually notice that the range wasn't right on one of your moves. And so in those cases, if you're an experienced Tekken player, you have good reaction time and you have the ability to be creative, you can notice that very quickly, pick up on it, and then change and convert your combo in some way to still try and squeeze out as much damage as possible, or in some other way turn it into an advantageous position. One thing a lot of good people do in those situations is, okay, I can't get great damage here, I'm scared that I might whiff, so what I'll do is I'll actually just spike my opponent with something near me, and then at least I get a powerful Oki situation. That is something that advanced players do all the time. And so I think Eddy also demands of you that you actually learn how to do conversions with your character, and if that's not something that you're comfortable with, it's just going to end up with you whiffing your combos a lot of the time, and then you get launched anyway. So that was just a quick rundown on my theories on why Eddy is actually a frustrating character to play against. There's some other stuff, like he has good throws, he has unbreakable throws and stuff like that, but it's really a case of you having to do a little bit of homework, and I think when you do, Eddy remains a powerful character in this game. I think he's good. I think he's exceptionally good online, for example, but he's not one of those like top tier characters. Actually, it doesn't make him broken. He's just unorthodox. There are characters who are unorthodox and kind of broken, or a little bit too good, let's say, like Xiao Yu. Maybe we'll do a video talking about her, because I think a lot of the things I said in this video actually apply to her as well. Another thing she will do that Eddy does is like run at you and get something connect to some sort of attack, and then go straight into a mix-up stance like that. She does that off of her slash kick and stuff like that as well, which is very frustrating, because you're used to the rhythm of when you're allowed to block something, it's your turn to attack, but then your opponent is like in a stance that not only has a very powerful mix-up with double launchers, it also crushes everything but a small selection of moves that you have to hit it with. So yeah, maybe we'll do a Xiao Yu video next, but that was just a little bit of an explanation of why I think Eddy's actually such a frustrating character. And so my big tip would be actually go into practice mode and learn some stuff about how to play against him. If there's good footage of your character playing against Eddy online at a high level, watch what the experienced people do and try and copy. And just a general tip I want to give you is don't be afraid to stick out big lows against him, because when he's in relaxed and he's doing a lot of this stuff, if you can just catch him with a chunky low, whatever you have, that'll definitely hit him out of relaxed. And usually when he's doing a lot of this transitioning and jumping around, he's not in a state where he's going to be like looking to block lows and punish you. So it's something that you can get away with a lot of time. That's just a general tip of mine. Down 4 with Eliza works wonders in that sense. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap up this little discussion. I might upload, I had a couple of games against a decent Eddy the other day, so I might upload some match footage. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. But for now, thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.